Hi, thanks very much for putting this together. I'm really looking forward to being here and seeing you and hearing from the other students as well. So I joined the lab in 1987, coming from doing an undergrad at Queen's in engineering physics and electrical engineering. I'd always, ever since high school, I had an analog synthesizer. I'd always been interested in doing something with music and electronics or music signal processing. I wasn't exactly sure what. So after I finished my bachelor's, I visited with John, I think, at Waterloo, and we kind of hit it off. I was very excited by the stuff that was going on in the lab, and I didn't really have a good idea of what my project was going to be. I knew it was going to be good, whatever it was. When I showed up, John said that he'd just gotten a research contract with Ford at their research place in Dearborn in Michigan, and they wanted to work on some sort of way of measuring the stereo imaging and car audio systems. And that, so the plan was to kind of do an update of Mark Pocock's binaural model and then try to apply it to measuring stereo imaging with loudspeaker pairs and eventually inside the car interior. And then John handed me a copy of Jens Blauert's book on spatial hearing and said, read this. And basically that had changed my life because I'm still doing spatial hearing research. So I worked on that model in the lab. We did measurements of we built a little plywood car interior in the lab. We did some measurements with Keymar, who I think had 2 ears by that point, so that was good. Because I remember taking him out to do recordings on campus, various spots, so he must have had 2 ears at that point. We did measurements of loudspeaker pairs and tried different coincident microphone techniques as Stan had described in his Are the Purists Wrong paper that you might be familiar with. So we got some data out of this. We did a few little listening experiments to compare how my model was reacting to some cross-canceled head-related transfer function synthesized spatial audio that one of the other students was working on, Kevin Kodorinsky. And I sort of realized that two things, that my model worked on binaural cues only, but it wasn't really taking into account the pinna cues that you get that tell you whether sounds are coming from up or down or front or back. And I wanted to build that into a model. And I also really wanted to know whether the model was doing the right thing. The model made predictions, but I didn't know whether it agreed with what human listeners were really doing. And I'd also stumbled across a chapter in a book on directional hearing by Fred Whiteman, who was at the University of Wisconsin, who is a pioneer in using head-related transfer function measurements for psychophysical research to understand how the auditory system works. So not just to produce audio to listen to, but actually understand how the auditory system worked. So after a couple of years of getting things set up, I went there and did my PhD in experimental psychology. And by the end of that, I wanted to know how the brain was working on these things. I did a postdoc with John Middlebrooks at the University of Michigan, doing some more psychophysics, again on sort of spectral cue, pinna cue use, and also looking at how directional information is encoded in the cortex of cats, who we did various mean experiments on cats, but they had very good drugs, so they were fine. And so Stan was asking me, did you really do work? Did you really cut up the cats? I did. So, I stayed on there for a few years in a research position, and then about 5 years ago I moved to Western, where I'm teaching in the Audiology program. And we have a nice large anechoic chamber there. I'm still doing spatial hearing research with normal hearing listeners, hearing impaired listeners, cochlear implant users. So really I haven't strayed too far from the path that you set me on at the beginning. I would just say about the lab that there was so much stuff going on, and it was really great that you kind of knew about all the other students' projects. So, I at least knew what Ron was doing with his integrals. Other students, Rob Wanamaker was working on dither, so we talk about that all the time. Kevin Kodorinsky was working on the cross-canceling. I've used that technique in my experiments. Later on, Jeff did some work on ambisonics that I kind of knew about, and Stan had recruited me to go with him to record the Kitchener-Waterloo Chamber Music concerts with the Soundfield ambisonic microphone, so I kind of knew about that. And now I'm using high-order ambisonics in the lab. John was really into developing the MLS method for doing impulse responses. I use that all the time to equalize my loudspeakers in the lab. Just yesterday I was teaching an undergrad student how to do that. I told him to read your 89 paper. So I think in my lab I try to get everyone to everyone should know about what everyone's projects are, because you just learn a lot. Get involved as much as you can. And I think just the idea of building your own tools. You saw those boxes that John was describing in the lab. I don't build so much hardware now, but I build my own software tools. And I remember we were working on that. You were working on a project looking at the LSB glitch in digital to analog converters. So you collected a lot of data, and we needed to plot all this stuff up. So I was tasked with writing some plotting software, and we had this pen plotter. It was really about understanding measurement techniques, building your own tools. Just get into it and do it. And I really try to carry that forwards. So it was very exciting. We did the recordings. I worked at the radio station. It was just fantastic. It was really a rich time, and I really appreciate having that opportunity. So thanks.